Hello, and welcome back to The Creative Catholics, a podcast on creativity, faith, and the hidden life. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Riverside, that we are using to record this episode. If you're interested in hosting webinars or recording a session for a podcast, please check them out at the link in the description. I'd also like to thank Marie Miller for her wonderful music for the intro and outro. Now, today, I am so excited for our episode. Our guest today is somebody I have admired for quite a long time for her ability to share about home and family life and motherhood in such a beautiful, simple, but profound way. Adele Collins is a homemaker, a gardener, avid reader, and a mother of 8. She's a graduate of Harvard Divinity School, and she shares encouragement and inspiration for faith-filled, simple living on Instagram at Simple Life Musings. Adele is somebody that I have admired and looked up to for a long time, so it was such a delight when she agreed to be on this show with me. Whatever creative project you're working on today, let's work on it together as we sit down with Adele Collins. Thank you so much, Adele, for coming on The Creative Catholics today. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
But I'm so happy that you're here because I found your Instagram in around 2020. And at that time, I was working full-time as a university professor. I had 3 kids, and I was very ingrained in this social way of living in the sense of my kids went to nursery, I went to work all day, picked them up, came home. Then obviously 2020 hit and the whole world, well, our whole world, because we were in the UK, shut down completely. I was home the whole time then working with my kids at home. And I suddenly realized how wonderful it was to be home. And I started following your Instagram and the inspiration that you're giving out, especially to women, about this importance of motherhood and the importance of home. What have you discovered about motherhood and presence and family life through building a life more centered around the home?
So when I was growing up, I did not have a strong vision of the home as a center of human flourishing. It was sort of the place that you would go to eat and sleep in order to go out into the world. I didn't really have this idea of the home is the heart of life. It's beautiful. It's creative. And I remember probably the first time that I encountered that vision was when in high school I read My Antonia by Willa Cather, which is a book about a pioneer woman in Nebraska through the memory of one of her friends. And there's this really striking and beautiful depiction of her as a mother at the end of the book that just left me speechless. I was so struck by it and drawn to that in a way that was not rational, but just I saw the beauty, and it was something that I was captivated by. So then I think that kind of planted this seed that started growing and being nurtured in different ways through the rest of high school, college. My husband, Ben, is my high school sweetheart. We met in that class that we read My Antonia in and got married in college. And just starting a family, this was kind of before the days of home coffee books. It was sort of before that whole, if you can imagine, it was really like probably Martha Stewart was the only person who was presenting a vision of home being beautiful. And it was almost cliche. And it was very much viewed as something that was sort of out of reach and not attainable for ordinary people. It was before Fixer Upper and all of these, this like home improvement empire. So in those early days, I was a graduate student at Harvard. My husband was working his first job, and we were very poor. We had very little money. We were living in a little apartment in Somerville, which is right next to Cambridge. And in those early days, we were sort of trying to cultivate a life that was beautiful and good, and it was so simple. I would say that experience was really formative for our family life and culture. We had a food budget of something ridiculous. It was like $50 a week, and we would buy our food in cash and then keep the change in a mason jar in our kitchen, and that was like our coffee money. Like we just didn't buy things at the store. We would go to the thrift store, all of these creative ways of making ends meet. But that really created our family culture, and a lot of those elements have persisted to this day. We've been married for 22 years. We just had our 22nd wedding anniversary. And looking back recently, we were talking about what are the ways that we prepared ourselves for our married life in the days that we were dating and in our early marriage. It was inspired by, there's this letter that we read that G.K. Chesterton wrote to his fiancée, in which he's talking about all the ways that he prepared himself for loving her in the years before he met her. And he in particular talks about loving all of the things in the world and sort of viewing them as a window into this deeper beauty and truth as a preparation for loving her. So Ben and I were reminiscing and talking about what are the things in our early marriage and those early days that prepared us for our family life and the marriage that we've had. And we look back on those days of scarcity, that we really had so little, and we're still able to cultivate that beauty and truth in the littlest ways. Those days are when we had our first garden. And it was like this tiny little, if you've ever been to Boston or Somerville, you know that there are these triple-decker houses. Each floor is an apartment. And there's these tiny little backyards that are just about the size of a very small kitchen or something like that. And we planted our first garden there. And it was this really simple, I'm trying to remember what we grew. We tried to grow corn in that garden, which was crazy. You need more space. You come from the Midwest, so you know you need more space than a tiny little garden like that to grow corn. But we got like a couple years of corn and tomatoes and basil. And it was this joyful experience of beauty and goodness that was so simple. Or, entertaining. I would say entertaining friends in those early days. It was sort of the anti-Martha Stewart. I think at that time, there was this sense if you're entertaining, you have to have propriety and this certain way of doing things. And to learn that opening your home is this humble, beautiful act that you can do with basically nothing. You can do with so little. And there was this little cookbook I remember that we worked through. Oh gosh, what was it called? The More with Less Cookbook, which is a Mennonite cookbook written by Mennonite missionaries who have been abroad. And it was like the easiest, simplest, cheapest meals.
Right.
And which was perfect for us, But so just kind of learning that a meal doesn't have to be incredibly lavish or opulent in order to be beautiful and in order to be delicious and nurturing, and you don't need to have a lot to be hospitable. So I would say all of those things are the lens through which we discovered beauty, creativity, and goodness of the home, of family life. That's kind of where we started. And I would say probably still we always kind of err on the side of simplicity, and we err on the side of having an open door as opposed to a perfect home. Just things like that, kind of having this spirit of openness.
So there's three things actually that you've mentioned there that I really want to touch on. Obviously, we were chatting last week and you mentioned My Antonia. And at that point, I had just only read it in high school. And because I feel like I'm a completely different person than I was in high school, when I read it in high school, I was very much like, oh, this book. And so when you mentioned it last week, I actually reread it over the weekend.
You're amazing.
Like,
oh my gosh.
This is so good. Why did I think that this was awful? It's just where we are, isn't it? Like it's the mindset that we're in and what we're being told as well and how we're being taught it. Yes, I totally reread it.
And remember I told you that the teacher who had us read that book, her advice was to reread it every 10 years of your life. Because every 10 years you will see it differently. And I have. I've reread it every 10 years. And every time I see it differently, I understand it differently. Like I'm drawn to different parts of the story. So it's one of those books that you can really unpack over a lifetime.
And the other thing that you mentioned there, which just spurred a memory for me, something that I had seen you post was you had posted, I can't remember when it was, might have been maybe for Ben's birthday, but you talked about how you were having friends over and you made like 2 huge pots of soup and some bread. And you're having people over does not need to be complex. And I just remember seeing that post and thinking, wow, I think so often, and myself especially, like I try to make it too much of an ordeal or, I try to make all this food. And so since seeing that post, like I have purposely had people over when my house was a bit of a mess and I made some soup and apple crisp.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was one of those things that like, it just spoke so deeply to me because I was like, you're right. We try to curate so much and we try to present these huge spreads and things like that. When in reality, people just want to have good food and good company. And it can be the simplest thing.
Yes. So that was born from 2 experiences. That kind of approach really came from 2 different experiences. Yes. So the first one was when we were living in Boston in those early days. We had a couple small group that we took turns hosting. Every week somebody would host it. And there were almost these like rules of keeping it simple. Just make a very simple meal. Everyone would come over. There was like a discussion about something. We'd pray together. So I think that kind of showed me that it can be very simple to have people over. And then fast forward, I don't know, 10 years, something like that, we had moved to California and really were very lonely. Like we had all of these little kids. We were sort of at home. We didn't know many people. And So at some point I was like, okay, we need to kind of do something about this. We need to find our people here in California. And I believe it was during Lent, Ben and I decided to have somebody over every week. And it continued for pretty much a year. We had somebody over. We just invite people over to our house once a week. In order to do that, and at the time we had probably 6 very small children, like 6 kids, maybe 8 and under sort of thing. And so we did Lent. It was like soup and Stations of the Cross. And it literally was like we would make a big pot of soup and do Stations of the Cross together. That was it. There was no hors d'oeuvres. There was no appetizers. It was just very, very simple. But it was amazing. And we did find our people. We found the best people, such dear friendships that we had. Or we'd like invite just one random person. We'd invite a priest or just like these different things. We had all of these relationships that were built through that. So I would say that was the experience that made us realize that the event that I'm remembering, it was around the time of Ben's birthday, which is right after Christmas. And we love to have people over to do caroling. And sometimes we'll walk around outside or we'll just do it in our living room. But the simplicity of what you're offering is never a barrier to kind of the closeness and intimacy of the relationships you build. And I almost think it's the opposite. It's almost an act of vulnerability to have somebody over when your house is a little bit messy, when things aren't perfect. So it actually fosters intimacy. Because people come over and realize that you have kind of this warmth and affection and openness to them. So it's almost a vote in favor of keeping it simple and not having things really curated and perfect, but just being more authentic with your friends.
So you obviously, because now on Instagram, it's amazing because there's so many people that follow you on Instagram. And so hopefully that message is getting out to loads and loads of people. But you've been on Instagram for almost, is it 10 years or so now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So how have you seen the platform change? But also how have you used it kind of in your vocation? And has that changed at all in the past decade?
So early on, it was definitely just a way of sharing family pictures with friends, kind of this very close. I had a family blog in the early days of blogging, which was a really lovely way to connect with other moms in particular in the early days when I was sort of stuck at home. I was overwhelmed with several small kids. It was hard to get out of the house. And so I met some very dear friends through that. Transitioned to Instagram, which was great because it was even easier. It was just sort of like a photo sharing app. And we moved to California during that time, which was a very large adventure for us, something that we weren't really planning for, seeking out. My husband's job moved to California. So we had this moment of discernment, like, can we do it? Is this crazy? Like, what are our other options? And I think partly because of that almost charism of grit and making do without, we embraced it as an adventure. We moved to California, and sharing that adventure, I would say, started drawing a bigger audience of people beyond just the people that we knew in real life. And at some point, I started sharing our Catholic faith more openly, sort of as our Catholic faith grew and our family grew. And then it became a really beautiful source of community and support. If you've ever spent time in California, California is almost post-Christian. Like really out there, people would be like, you're Catholic. That's so interesting. Like you're all natural. I have friends who are vegan. Like it's kind of this just really different spot. So that having that Catholic community became so important that we knew that we were within a universal church, that we very much had the support. And just to know that there was like a family in New England or a family in France or like whatever it was that's also living this faith was such a source of encouragement, I would say. And we have met very lovely real life families through that experience of sharing our faith online. So it sort of became more about sharing our family life and the goodness of family life and also these truths of the Catholic Church that really have enabled our family to flourish and are at the heart of family life. So that was a big change. Then we moved back to Virginia and sort of have continued to use it as a platform to share the goodness and beauty of Catholic family life.
And one of the messages that you share a lot about is the kind of natural family order, if you will, when you have multiple kids. And that's something, again, that just speaks really, really close to me because I'm in the first decade. My oldest is 10 and my youngest is 1. I got 5 kids in that 10 years. And sometimes when it just the day-to-day just gets so heavy, I do think back on some of the times when you're like, wait for the second half, like wait for the second decade. How have you found it? Obviously you have 8 kids. And is it 19 to 2?
Almost 19, yeah. She's still 18 to 2. So like I mentioned, I don't come from a big family. I come from a small family. I did not grow up around big families. When I met Ben, he was the youngest of four, and that was the biggest family I had ever met. So all of this world that I'm living in, surrounded by big families, having a big family is totally alien to what I grew up or imagined. And when I was growing up, I always imagined having 8 kids would be 8 times as hard as having one child, that it was like a multiplication problem. And so I'll tell you, when I had my first baby, I was totally overwhelmed. It was so hard. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And I felt defeated because I was like, I've always dreamed of having a large family. I can't even handle one. How am I going to handle 8 times this? And I think to Ben, I was like, okay, I think one is pretty good. That's like about what I can handle. And thanks be to God, we had another soon thereafter. And I had a different experience even with the second. I would say going from 1 to 2 for me was a lot easier than going from 0 to 1.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Our first baby, she's been like the easiest kid in the world, save for that newborn stage. She was so high needs in those first couple of months. It was really hard. And then going like kind of the second, I knew what to expect. I don't think any transition has been as hard as from 0 to 1 for me, because you're reorienting your whole life around, I had been in academia, so I was used to having all day to my thoughts and my work that I was doing. I didn't have to make any sacrifices. So around that time, I started hearing this message from more seasoned mothers than myself who had bigger families, which was, it gets a lot easier at some point. And people had different kind of specifics about when. Some people said when your eldest turns 8, you will feel this ease come into your family life that you might not expect. Other people would talk about the second decade of parenting. So there's kind of the first decade, you're putting in all of this work into each of your kids. Each of your kids really needs an adult holding their hand and teaching them and instructing them in all these things. And then at some point, if you have done that work, there will be this ease that you experience because your kids are moving towards greater independence. And not only that, but they're actually thoughtful, loving people who are engaged in the world around. They're creative. So they're doing things like, I have a son who loves playing games, and frequently we will walk downstairs and he will be leading the other kids in a game because he loves playing games. So things like that there's just this ease and lightness that I would never have expected. I also think that just as your family grows, there's a family culture that you're building. So that family culture is almost carrying the weight of things for you a little bit. And anybody who, has raised kids will tell you that a lot of times little things like family customs or family traditions, they almost unintentionally get created, that you'll be like, I'm going to make corned beef on this day. And then your kids are like, Mom and Dad, we have to have corn on this day. This is our family tradition. But there's a beauty to that too, because all of a sudden everybody is invested in it. I mean, it's great for kids. It's so important for kids to feel the family is a place that they can participate. We're not just adults creating an entertainment experience for our kids, which unfortunately I think is what modern parenting often errs on the side of, that we feel like we are entertaining our children and we are not giving them that great joy that comes from participating in the family life.
Yeah.
So as your kids start to participate in the family life, it lightens the load for everyone. So that being said, having a big family is not easy, but it is not as hard. Having 8 kids is not as hard as having 8 times 1 kid. There is a certain natural order that emerges that makes it more joyful, easier, just this sense of a family spirit, a family culture that pervades your day-to-day life. It's sometimes busier because you have all these kids who are doing different things, but it's less work. It's kind of not as much work on the day-to-day as when you have 3, 4, 5 very little kids. You're really doing all of the physical work yourself, and that's exhausting.
Yeah. When my third child turned 5, that's when I kind of said to my husband, I really want another child. And when we got married, well, actually, let's be honest, it was way before we got married. We talked about how many kids we wanted to have because we're both Catholic and we both come from families of 4. So I was always like, I want to have 6 kids. And my husband was like, I want to have 4. And actually what he said to me, he's like, let's get to 4 and see how we're doing, which I thought was hilarious. So yes, we had 3 and I had hyperemesis with my first 3 really badly. I was sick until I gave birth and I lost like 2 stone in each pregnancy, which is like 30 pounds in each pregnancy.
Oh my gosh,
sick.
That's so hard.
Yeah, it was. But the funny part was that literally the moment I gave birth, I was completely fine. I was not sick at all. It was a very kind of interesting, moment for me every time I had given birth. But I had, after my third, I was like, I don't know if my body can actually take it right now. Like I've had 3 in 3 years. My third was born the day after my first turned 3. I was just exhausted. I'd lost all this weight with each pregnancy. And I was like, I just don't feel well. And so we took a bit of some time to just kind of raise those 3, let my body recover a bit. And then once she was about 5, I was like, right, I think we need to have a few more. We have our 4th, we had our 5th, and they are just amazing. And they just, how every single time you have a new child, they just complement your family so well. Yes, it's a hard work, but at the same time, there is that beautiful, just the kids all want to play together. And then I have time to read, or I have time to, not always like in one sitting for a long time, but you have a bit of time to read or a bit of time to do whatever. And
Or you can take a shower, like little things like that. Like I remember when you have little kids, you're like, I never have a break at all. And there's just more space.
One of the things as well that I really love is that you constantly are sharing how homemaking can be a creative act. What are some ways that you use your creativity in homemaking?
So homemaking is an incredibly creative act because we have so many different mediums that we're working with. I mean, basically all of the senses are involved in some way. So something as simple as a family dinner is an opportunity for creativity. It could be like, I sometimes will share bouquets that we have in our house, just things that we've like picked from outside. I have a daughter who's gotten really into making these beautiful, she actually makes the most beautiful bouquets out of anyone in our home. But it also could be in the morning, the kids that are homeschooling and I do a morning offering at our little family altar and we light incense. And just that incorporating like the smell and the visuals of the smoke. So all of those things, I mean, even something as simple as like a bedtime routine is an opportunity for creativity. So there are all of these things that are available to us and we have such freedom. That in a job, you're working for productivity, you're working under deadline, there's kind of this pressure to produce. And in family life, we have this tremendous freedom. So we can really kind of be prompted by the Holy Spirit and share our gifts. It's almost like all of the freedom without the burdens, like we don't have to crank it out in this way that like if you're exhausted and you just need to put your kids to bed, you can just put your kids to bed. But if you want to really draw it out, we have these songs that we always sing to our 2-year-old at bedtime. And she like loves these songs. And it's like we are adding songs to it. So now it's like everyone in the family knows this progression of songs that's like, or if you want to put Rose to bed, you've got to know all the songs. But that to me, it's just this beautiful moment of closeness. And to hear her, like we always end with the Salve Regina, and she is 2.5 and like sings along with it. And it's just so sweet and intimate. So like we've talked about planting a garden. I feel like a garden is it is our origin story. We talk about God walking with Adam and Eve in the garden. There's something so beautiful and holy about having a garden. So that's something really simple that you don't have to have anything fancy. It does not need to be from the pages of Home and Garden. You can literally just plant a few things in a pot. Container gardening is a great way to start if you have a porch. So something like that is a creative act. I think it's actually really good and important for mothers to find a creative outlet for themselves too. And that can change based on the season of life. I remember in my early days, I was really into knitting. So we'd knit different things or sew different things. And then kind of as we had more and more children, just the physical logistics of that became harder. Like, how do I even do this? And so just to find other creative outlets. So for me, that's been music. I play in a quartet, and that's a great joy to rehearse with the musicians in my quartet and to perform. But I think that it is as unique as individuals are unique. So, if you love theater, if you love poetry, a dear friend is actually getting her master's in poetry right now. She's home with her children, and that just has persisted as this beautiful creative outlet for her. So I think finding that thing and then sharing it with your family. And then over time, there's this sense that everybody in your family is finding these creative outlets and sharing them. So I have been surprised with what those creative outlets are for some of my kids. I have some kids who are really, really artistic, or I have some kids who love sport, or other kids who, like, I have a mathematician in the family, that is like puzzles and like problem solving is this great creative outlet. Or our son and one of our daughters actually have gotten into like writing computer programs with their dads. They'll like do these creative programs. And so that's, I think, when family life really, you can just see it flourishing. when all of the people have started discovering these creative outlets, these gifts and interests, and then sharing them with one another, it is so beautiful. It is kind of, I think, what He intended creativity to be, sort of participating in bringing new things into the world. The Latin root for the word creativity, creare, is the Latin root. And it is the word that is used to describe God's creation of the world in the book of Genesis. So creativity itself is a modern word. It was not really used before the 20th century, which is interesting, but it really is participating in that creativity of God and bringing something new into the world.
And I think really kind of encouraging all of your kids to have their different creative outlets, because they are all going to be so different. They're not all going to be the same. They might share some of them, but not all of them. I was actually thinking about you and your daughter, because this past week we've had here in England, the Chelsea Flower Show. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's huge. But there's so many beautiful displays from all the different florists and obviously companies and things like that as well. But like sometime you guys should come over to London and see it. It's incredible.
During COVID, there's this British show, I think it's called Gardener's World.
Yes.
And it was so lovely to just see all these different, gardening, I love it because it is really creative, and just looking in the natural world, there are fields of wildflowers that are so stunningly beautiful, and there's cultivated gardens that are so beautiful, and there's just so many different ways. And it's sort of like just this beautiful metaphor for the human soul. I actually am always getting these spiritual insights when I'm gardening. I'm like, weeding a garden is like examining your soul for confession. Like all of these I just really do think that the natural world is such a great teacher.
It is. There's a thing here in the UK called, if you have a garden, it's called the Chelsea Chop. So the week of the Chelsea Flower Show, you're supposed to cut a third off all of your flowers in your garden to help encourage them to grow. And I was actually thinking, I did my Chelsea Chop just today, actually, because we have a bank holiday here. And I was thinking, it just encourages so much in creativity and in spirituality, because you have all these flowers and they actually all have buds on them already. And it's so hard to actually cut them off a third because you have all these buds that haven't blossomed yet. But you know that if you do this, you'll get 5 times more as many flowers as you have. Whereas like was it last year? Yeah, last year, because I just had a newborn. I didn't do my Chelsea Chop. And yeah, you get great buds at the beginning, but they die and you don't get any more for like pretty much the rest of the summer. And I was like, wow, there's something here for like spirituality.
There's a reason why Jesus spoke in parables, and they so often were based on farming. If you've ever pruned a fruit tree, you almost have to brutalize the tree. Like you have to just cut back so much growth, and it feels like you're going to kill the tree. And that really is the way to get fruit. So I think for anybody who's been through a season of pruning in their spiritual life or personal life, where you're like, Lord, what is the work that you're doing in my life right now? It just gives such great hope. It's like instructive, that we can look at that and say, okay, God is doing something. God has a plan for this season of pruning in my life. So yeah, the Chelsea Chop, I hadn't heard of that. That's so fun.
Because I assume it would work for like places in the US as well, but it's kind of like a UK thing that like, yeah, you do the Chelsea Chop, which is the last week usually of May. Yeah, like you were saying, there's just so many, beautiful ways that we can kind of learn from creativity and apply it to our spiritual life. And as well as that, I want to talk a bit about the book that you are reading, or you might have finished it by now, the leisure book.
There's The Basis of Culture. Yes. So a friend recommended this book by Josef Pieper, which has honestly affected my day-to-day life a lot, because the premise of the book is, I think it was written in the 1940s or 1950s, very much addressing kind of the modern world, and in particular, our obsession with work. That we really view ourselves, he calls it, we turn ourselves into a proletariat, that we're sort of like working for production. And we have really lost a sense of what leisure is. And leisure in his book is so directly tied with basically like the Holy Spirit and creativity. So sort of that receptive spirit that allows us to wonder and also pursue beauty and create. It can be really easy as a mom of a bunch of kids to make an idol out of efficiency and productivity. And, there were a lot of years that I think I was just always thinking, what is the thing I can accomplish in this second? How can I make this process more streamlined? How can I make sandwiches faster? In essence, I was turning myself into this little worker bee in a way that I had lost sight of what leisure was. So it's been something that I've tried to really bring into my prayer leisure is the ultimate act of leisure is worship. That's something that's so beautiful. Calls it like the festival, which the culmination of the festival is the Mass, is the Holy Mass. It's just sort of the ability to wonder, celebrate, receive life as a gift. I do think it's very tied to the Sabbath. And in his book, he argues that this is the foundation of culture, of beauty, of philosophy, of friendship, of faith, all of it, that leisure is the basis of it. So that really blew my mind. And I would say has just changed the way I approach things on the day to day. Like, even though we still have to work, we still, there's still things we need to do. We can't just stop doing laundry or whatever it is, but kind of bringing that spirit of leisure and also understanding that there's an order, that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. And that day of Sabbath, so we observe the Sabbath out of reverence for God. So it really is kind of like out of reverence and obedience. But it is a gift to us. In cultures that have reorganized around giving people a Sabbath day, which thankfully most of Western culture, we sort of agreed on this. It was this huge sacrifice in terms of productivity to say the dignity of the human person requires that we give this day of rest in observance and in obedience to God and out of reverence to God, but also it's a gift to us as humans to have that center of leisure. So yes, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I think that in my household, my kids and husband have noticed it. Just being more likely to just sit down and spend time with them. Moms are so good at doing this. Like, we're always kind of flitting around from one thing to the next and picking things up. And so just to have this gift of presence is something that's so unusual and striking to people. So yes, I think I highly recommend it. Leisure, the Basis of Culture is the name of the book.
And how do you think, as mothers especially, and in the home, how can we cultivate true leisure in this culture that we're currently living in?
So practically, I would say to start with 2 things. And the first is the Sabbath. So what does Sunday look like for you? Is it a day that you're rushing around and trying to catch up and do everything that you didn't get to in the rest of the week and just sort of play whack-a-mole? Or is it a day of rest? And I think that having that single pillar of leisure in your week will change everything about the rest of your week, about how you experience it. So basically making Sunday about going to Mass, spending time together as a family, spending time in leisure. And that means things get a little imperfect. Like, you're not going to be doing tons of housework. You're not going to be completing all the projects. So really embracing that. In the day-to-day, though, I would say the second pillar for leisure in family life is the family meal. So this is something that is hard in the early years because it can feel like a circus to get down together for dinner. You have kids that are climbing on the table and, you've gone to the effort of making this food and then somebody doesn't want to eat it. And then the other kid is done right away. So it takes a certain amount of patience and repetition. And also, I would say a change of mind. So instead of thinking about the family meal as being performative or everyone has to be on their best or this is when the kids are going to get all of their vitamins for the day or something like that, really thinking about it as a time for you to connect with your spouse primarily and have these conversations that you can then invite the children into in age-appropriate ways. So we've sometimes at the family dinner table, well, first of all, we take a few steps to make it so that we're not just always running back and forth between the kitchen. So we'll set the table, we'll pour water into the glasses. These little things, I did not know that that's stuff you had to do before a family meal. And so it's you're getting condiments from the kitchen, having something very simple that everybody will eat. If it's a bowl of rice or buttered noodles or something like that, that your children can sort of eat. We won't have them eat for an hour or 2 before dinner just so that they're legitimately a little bit hungry and will sit down and eat this, especially for the little ones. And then have a conversation that you can invite the kids into. And that, it's been very beautiful to see our now adult children really carry that as a pillar of our family life. And when they're talking to their friends, what is your family like? They'll talk about that. We have these amazing discussions. And for example, Pope Leo's encyclical just came out this morning. And Ben and I have been trying to read it in our free moments. And I can guarantee you that at our family dinner tonight, we will be talking about that. And we'll be sharing our thoughts or ideas so it can be lofty things. It can be very simple things. My husband is great at sort of curating the conversation. He often has an idea of what he wants to talk about. and has sort of taken his role as the leader of the family very seriously in that way. And it's been so beautiful to see the way that the kids engage with that. But also, you can sort of give each little one their voice at the table. So sometimes we'll do like highs and lows. And even like our littlest 2-year-old will share something from her day. So this sense that like everybody has their chance to share something. When you're sharing something, everybody at the table listens to you. If you have lots of little kids, those early years, you might be like excusing your kids to like have some toys next to the table so they can like get down and crawl and play. But that can be a real pillar of leisure in your family to actually be like sitting together. And I do think that there's something so Eucharistic about living our family life with creativity. And it does culminate, like the family table is so beautiful in particular for that reason, that it calls to mind the Eucharistic table. But you talking about like the flowers, like when we're setting our table, doing it with particular care, because there is this sense that it is an icon that points to the greater truth of the Eucharistic table, that our families are icons. Icon is not the sacred reality itself. It's something that points to the sacred reality. So that's really what our marriages are in particular, but our family life and all of these little things in our family life point to these deep sacred realities that we have.
And I remember you mentioned before as well about seeing the mother kind of as the guardian of leisure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So as mothers, we have this freedom and also duty, privilege to preserve the culture and pass it down from one generation to the next. And the reason is because we're not bound by all of those things. It's not like we're cranking things out to be productive. We can really tend to each unique soul that has been placed under our care. Actually, one of my favorite saint quotes of all time is by Edith Stein, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, and it's "A woman's soul is a shelter in which multiple souls unfold." And that captures womanhood so beautifully. But that is, in this conversation, talking about the way that leisure is the foundation of culture, that idea from Pieper's book. The home is really the only place where you have that full freedom, and paired with the love of the individual, that a person's worth does not come from how good they are at something, how productive they are, how smart they are. Their worth is inherent, and that really changes the way that we interact with one another. And I think the family and the church are the only two places where I see that truth being fully lived out. There's just really no other place. As mothers, I think that gives us great creative license. It's also a very high standard that we need to hold ourselves to as far as sharing things that are good and beautiful with our children. And I think also is a huge vote in favor of the education and formation of women. Like I have 7 daughters and 1 son, so I sort of specialize in raising girls. And I feel like it's an incredible responsibility and privilege to raise these girls, because they need to have the intellectual, spiritual, emotional formation in order to do this work, which is so central to society. It's so important to pass down these things that are good and beautiful. And it really is something that it's like freely available to us, but it requires great formation, personal discipline, intention, I would say, in our homes to do it well.
You're very much shaped by books. How does that reading, how does that time and kind of contemplation and intellectual life as well, how does that sustain your creativity in motherhood?
So I would say when I had a lot of little kids, I probably was not as much of a reader. And in that first decade, in the second decade, thanks to a dear friend of mine who actually really kindled this fire of reading and knowledge, I have read a lot. Like really, I'm always reading a few books. And I would say in a lot of different ways. I mean, especially reading good literature. Just in the past year alone, some of the books that I've read, they really crystallized some of these things that we're talking about in terms of like, what is good and beautiful? You can read a book and you almost like you bring this whole formation that you have in your soul. You bring all of these graces that we have from the Holy Spirit to reading it. And a good book, you will read it and recognize it has good poetics because the virtuous characters are like good and experiencing joy. There might be a character that is really dark and troubled, and you can see the way that sin has affected their life. I actually last summer was reading East of Eden because my daughter had read it and gotten about halfway through and was like, Mom, this book is too dark. I don't know if I want to finish reading it. She's like, you read it and tell me what you think. So I like read the book, got about halfway through, and I was like, this book is so dark. I don't know that I can finish this book. Got the counsel of a priest that was basically like, yeah, you should probably finish reading it. Finished reading it. And it is one of those books that was very dark and difficult and also was very beautiful and true. And you can sort of see, I mean, I would love to talk about that book at length at some point. There's a way that literature for me, but I would say all good art, really transcends the day-to-day things that we're experiencing. It really draws us out of ourselves into these higher truths and realities. Sometimes, through sadness. Sometimes it's through sorrow. It could be through anger, like all of these, or through beauty. I think that's what's so beautiful about our Catholic faith is we don't have sort of this like kumbaya vision that everything just has to be very neat and beautiful. Like there is such beauty in the struggle and in our liturgies, certainly like anybody who has gone through the Easter Triduum, you like descend into darkness and emerge on Easter morning. It is a spiritual journey. It is probably the greatest drama I've been through in my life is the Triduum. I think all great art, again, kind of calls us into that mystery in a way. So for me at home, like I do love art. We love to go to art museums. I love music, but literature, I think in particular, is something that can give us a window into these things from our homes. That's just so beautiful.
Yeah. And for you, what is one small creative practice that's really helped you stay rooted in this season of life? I know you mentioned your music. How is that helping you stay rooted?
Okay, well, I'll talk about two creative practices. So the first, yes, I have this quartet. I'm a flutist and I'm in flute quartet. So it's flute, violin, viola, and cello. And I would say that has just been a really wonderful creative journey. Partly, I love chamber music. It's like you can just get a few musicians together and it very much transcends just a single line of music in this way that's so beautiful and very collaborative. I love that my kids are growing up in a house that is filled with music and even the littlest ones, very much love and look forward to that. And it sparked them to be more musical in their day-to-day life. But last week when we talked, I was telling you about making lunches for Ben.
Yes.
So that's kind of like, because I think sometimes we can see these things that are like, okay, this mother is a painter and she makes these beautiful watercolors in her free time. And it can feel sort of like, well, good for her. That's awesome. But like, what is my day-to-day life? So Ben his work has been really busy lately. It's often hard for him to take a lunch break. And so I've been packing him lunches. And I love just the creative opportunity to make these lunches that are sort of interesting and nutritious. Now, actually, a bunch of my kids have caught on to the fact that I'm making him these nice lunches and are like, Mom, could you make me that nice protein bowl that you made for Dad the other day? So just using the lunch as a creative outlet. There's so many Pinterest type things for like making different protein bowls, different days of the week. So I will say my quartet and making lunches for Ben are my two creative outlets that have kind of given life to my day-to-day life.
And what I love about that too is you have seen a moment where there can be light in the day, both for you, like when you're making them, but then for him when he opens it and has it in the middle of the day, and it's one of those things, I think that really it speaks, doesn't it, to kind of using your creativity that brings light in different kind of random moments throughout the day for your family. And I think that's absolutely, absolutely amazing. Thanks so much, Adele.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a joy to talk to you, Alex.
And I will chat to you later. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And lastly, thank you so much to all of you for listening in to this episode. Until next time, stay creative and keep making what matters most.